Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Ursula. I'm an indie author of historical fiction, and I've been an avid reader since the age of 3. You might notice today I'm wearing some purple eye makeup to change up my Spooktober look a little bit to go with my purple lipstick. I know I'm not particularly good at wearing makeup because I'm very tomboyish, so I just generally don't wear makeup at all, but I do think it's something, I like to, enjoy having fun with every so often. So today I'm going to be discussing how to read the Divine Comedy. This is a blog post I did in July. Now I'm going to be turning it into a vlog format. It's basically talking about ways you can sort of like study it or read it along with studying, because this is obviously a very dense book. It's not something you can just like pick up, lightweight reading, like read at the beach or like on your subway commute and just understand without doing any sort of outside study. I guess it's kind of like similar to the Aeneid. You can't just like pick it up and go. You need to understand a lot of historical and like literary and mythological and religious references in it. So it seems nothing short of a miracle. Then I emerged a passionate Dante-phile for my first reading of the Commedia in 2004, since my translation by Lawrence Binyon, while very good on its own merits, just wasn't the most ideal for a newbie. Because of the speed at which I read, the lack of supplementary notes and essays, the fact that I didn't read many of the footnotes after returning to the book following a frustrated hiatus of several months, and the fact that I had to mentally translate the flowery Elizabethan English language into modern English. There were many things I unfortunately just never understood through no real fault of mine. It was just like basically the reading style I used and not doing much outside study. It was a very big picture story for me about a beautiful, poignant, unrequited love and the very relatable theme of having to sink to the lowest, saddest, most hopeless point possible before starting to gradually rise up through happier, more hopeful, more beautiful places and ultimately emerge a better person, back on track with one's life and faith. And of course, being only 24 years old, my prefrontal cortex wasn't quite finished developing yet. Thus, my inability to grasp a lot of nuances and exercise emotional control in my negative reactions to things which didn't agree with my own personal beliefs. And as I've mentioned several times before, a lot of people don't really understand this or talk about it enough, although obviously someone who's 24, 25 is like nowhere near as like immature and inexperienced and intelligent as someone who's all of 12 or even like 18 years old. They're still not equal to like someone who's 30 or above, because the brain doesn't finish developing until about the age of 25, and so therefore sometimes many of the things you like say or do or think when you're as old as 24 or 25, they can seem like very similar to those of a teenager, not for like a more mature adult, because our brains just aren't done developing yet, and the prefrontal cortex is the last thing to finish developing completely. And that does explain like some of the style I had when writing film and book reviews when I was in my early mid-20s. It just like wasn't completely there yet. So the importance of a good translation cannot be stressed enough. There are over 100 to choose from, but not all are created equal. Unless you're very familiar and comfortable with flowery Elizabethan English, faux archaisms, and poetic diction and contractions, like for example, maketh, havest, wouldst, wast, wert, doth, dost, thee, thine, ye, thou, o'er, cometh, lovest. Chances are you'll find that style very distracting and annoying when stretched over 14,233 lines. Many people still regard Longfellow's 1867 translation as one of the finest, but it's just not ideal for a newbie on account of the language. And I do have the Longfellow translation. I found it at a used bookstore in 2017 when I also picked up the Mark Musa translation, which also comes with his translation of La Vita Nuova. The one I had read in the Portable Dante with the Lawrence Binyon translation of the Commedia has a translation of La Vita Nuova by Dante Gabriel Rossetti and some excerpts of some of Dante's other works. And I basically only got the Longfellow translation because it has like the famous Gustave Doré woodcut illustrations. And I'll just like read you a little sample of the Longfellow translation, like because this language is extremely difficult to understand, and it's not just the like fake Elizabethan English he's inserting on someone who never used like a language with equivalent pronouns and grammar. It's just like a lot of the word order he uses makes it extremely difficult sometimes to understand what's he even saying. Even as the flame of unctuous things is wont to move upon the outer surface only, so likewise was it there from heel to point. Master, who is that one who writhes himself? More than his other comrades quivering, I said, in whom a redder flame is sucking. And he to me, if thou wilt have me bear thee down there along that bank which lowest lies, from him thou'lt know his errors in himself. And I, what pleases thee, to me is pleasing. Thou art my Lord, and knowest that I depart not from thy desire, and knowest what is not spoken. Straightway upon the fourth dyke we arrived. We turned, and on the left-hand side descended, down to the bottom full of holes and narrow. And the good master yet off from his haunch deposed me not, till to the hole he brought me, of him who so lamented with his shanks. Whoe'er thou art that standest upside down, O doleful soul, implanted like a snake, to say, began I, if thou canst speak out. I stood even as the friar who is confessing the false assassin, who, when he is fixed, recalls him so that death may be delayed. And he cried out, Dost thou stand there already? Dost thou stand there already, Boniface? By many years the record lied to me. Art thou so early satiate with that wealth, for which thou didst not fear to take by fraud the beautiful lady, and then woe her work, and then work her woe? Such I became as people are who stand, not comprehending what is answered them, as if be mocked, and know not how to answer. Then said Virgilius, Say to him straightway, I am not he thou thinkest. And I replied, as was imposed on me. Whereat the spirit rised with both his feet, then sighing with a voice of lamentation, said to me, Then what wantest thou of me? If who I am thou carest so much to know, that thou on that account hast crossed the bank, know that I vested was with the great mantle, and truly was I son of the she-bear, so eager to advance the cubs that wealth above, and here myself I pocketed. And it just basically goes on like that throughout much of the poem. It's just, extremely difficult to read unless you're familiar with that. And I, of course, don't mind or really have a problem if it's like, for example, Shakespeare, because obviously that was the language he was originally writing in. But of a lot of translations of like older like books and like Bibles and prayer books and things, they're trying to like impose this Elizabethan language on people who never spoke like that, just to like make it sound like it's not modern. When I mean, there are other ways you could do that, maybe like, for example, like some old-fashioned word choices, maybe if you obviously would define them in the footnotes or glossary. But it's just really, really hard for me to read an entire book like that. I mean, just this point can't be stressed enough. I know like older people might be more familiar with it, but just I'm, only 41 years old. That's not like a language style I grew up reading. So anyway, unless you're doing a lot of outside study, it's a good idea to choose an edition with copious notes and essays, not just footnotes explaining historical and theological references. Many editions also have illustrations showing the geography of hell, purgatory, and paradise. Speaking of footnotes, I wouldn't recommend interrupting your reading by constantly looking down at them. That was a big problem for me when I began reading the Commedia in late 2003, when I think I must have just turned 24 at the time. I think I had like already had my birthday. It was that late in December, and it was a reason I ridiculously originally only gave it 4.5 stars. But most people don't have a wealth of knowledge about medieval Italian history, Catholic theology, classical antiquity, and Dante's personal life. So what is to be done? Number 1, read through the footnotes before reading each canto. Number 2, read the footnotes after each canto. Number 3, glance down at the most important footnotes as you're reading, but not in the middle of a sentence. Number 4, read the footnotes afterwards, then go back through and read the canto again. Number 5, reread the canto, and this time read the footnotes as you go along. And there's also another possible option, like if you're like listening to like a lecture about each canto. There are many of them out there. They're pretty easy to find. I did have another blog post about like extra textual sources for the Divine Comedy. You can listen to that lecture and then reread the canto afterwards, or read or reread it first and then listen to the lecture. Or like obviously like you might want to like read along with the lecture and like just look down at the lines or tercets being mentioned as you're reading. And a lot of editions, like I mentioned, it starts with a summary of each canto. Like Musa and Binion did this too. Like you can see what they would have. They would just like a summary of events that happened in it, and then they would have lots of, well, not necessarily lots of, but footnotes as needed, like for like references, historical, like religious, theological, like mythological things like that. Then like some of them, like the Derling Martinez translation, they don't have any footnotes interrupting it. They have a brief summary at the front, but what they do have after each canto, they'll have on like many pages of notes referencing each line, and there are a few illustrations too. And they also have a bunch of like essays at the back, and this is why I really want their translation of Purgatorio and Paradiso as well. It's considered the gold standard by many current Dante scholars, but unfortunately the prices are extremely high, and I'm waiting for them to go down a little bit. Hopefully, maybe Black Friday they'll have a big sale and I can afford them properly. But I will do have other translations I'm interested in reading also for my collection. I'll get into that in a future vlog about Divine Comedy and translation. So think of it as listening to a song referencing or inspired by actual events or people in the artist's life. Sure, knowing about these personal details can enhance your enjoyment and understanding, but you shouldn't need to know about them to like the song and grasp the bigger picture. This isn't the kind of book you can race through and understand everything. Many people have been reading the Commedia for decades and still find new details or insights every time. There are also some references and details we may never understand the true meaning of. Just take it one canto at a time instead of forcing yourself to power read it within a week or month. And as I've said, that was one of the problems for me when I read it for the first time. I wasn't really like focusing on I did like focus on the beautiful poetry and imagery, but it's just I was like trying to just get through it because that Elizabethan English was like so annoying, and I had to keep mentally translating it, and that unfortunately made me miss a lot of very important details. And like some of these, I'm like really embarrassed to realize in hindsight, well, I missed that. That was like a really important point, but I just didn't like remember it or like understand it at all. A lot of people, especially ones who only read Inferno, come away with really shallow, superficial, silly interpretations. First and foremost is one I too once bought into, that Dante was getting revenge on his enemies by putting them in hell. But how can you get revenge on people who are already dead through their friends and families reading it? I've also seen the ridiculous claims, always from these like clowns who like whine, "Oh, I was forced to read this in school and hated it," crowd, that it was the product of drugs, mental illness, or insanity. I mean, do you really believe this? Are they projecting their own issues, or are they truly admitting they can't understand complex, sophisticated literature? I mean, these people sound like they have very, very short attention spans and they're reluctant readers, so they won't like anything that's, more than like 200 pages and has lots of white space on the page, is like one sentence paragraphs and a very simple, basic storyline. They just don't understand complex literature, and unfortunately, a lot of English teachers do unknowingly, I believe, contribute to this problem. They like suck the life out of everything. You're like have to overanalyze every single sentence instead of just enjoying a book for what it is. And they often throw students into the deep end with like more like complex literature and epic poetry. Like instead of starting with something lightweight like poems by like Ovid or Virgil, they'll just toss them right in with the Aeneid or the Iliad instead of just gradually warming up to it. And of course these students won't like it if you've never read that style of writing before and you're not familiar with that era and all sorts of things like that, and then outside references. You won't like or enjoy or understand it very much. So I do think English teachers do need to do a better job of easing students into complex, mature, sophisticated literature, and just like basically like having simple literature when you're young, and then now you're in junior high or high school, it's time to start reading advanced adult literature, and you had nothing in between, or at least didn't start with the more lightweight, easier to access and understand works of these great writers. I highly recommend doing some outside study as you're reading. And as I mentioned, I did have a post where I shared some of the sources I've used, like YouTube channels, academic websites, books, etc. It made me aware of a lot of things I wouldn't have otherwise picked up on or paid much attention to. Above all, don't think of it as a long revenge fantasy, a boring medieval history lesson, or a stern theological lecture. Many books from the Middle Ages are intrinsically wedded to that era, but the Commedia transcends time and feels remarkably relevant and modern over 700 years later. Thank you for listening to the end. If you have, I really appreciate all the positive feedback I've been getting, and people have been watching my videos. I know it does take a while to build up like a substantial audience and like bigger viewership, but I do really appreciate all of you guys who are watching and giving positive comments to me. Maybe my next post, I'm planning more Dantean posts, turning my blog posts into vlogs. I think I might discuss some different translations and what to look for in a translation, so that should be on Wednesday. My schedule for the moment, I'm planning to do on Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, unless like something comes up. So really, thank you for listening to me, and I will hopefully see you guys again very soon. Thanks. Bye.